Y'all know who y'all rocking with. It's your boy Rocky, that dark-skinned one. And it's time for us to tap in to that new show, that new heat, New York Stompers. Talk to me nice so you might not get to talk to me twice. You heard me? How my peoples doing out there, man? How my SIGs doing out there, man? How my real rights doing out there, man? How my 550s doing out there, man? Y'all know the vibes. I would like to take the time out to say, by the time all the viewers watch this video, I pray and find y'all in the best health, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, all of that above, you heard? They say sometimes we gotta pray for each other because we all we got. Tell how my people's doing, man. Yeah, I told y'all I was cooking up. I told y'all what was coming. And, you know, before we get into the second season of New York Steppers, I say, yo, you know what? I'm going to just drop the season of New York Stompers. And this is the difference, right? So New York Steppers is all about the generation now, or my generation. You heard from the 2000s to, you understand? And the New York Stompers is more like the OGs of the game, the ones who, before the cameras got put up and all that, before we started getting regulated, you know, things shifted back in the days, back in the early 80s and all that. You had is becoming millionaires at 20 years old. You heard? And now, you know, it's not the same. So that already show you that the Stompers and the Steppers is not the same. You heard? All right. So without further introduction, let's get to it. We back spinning those BX blocks again. Soundview to be exact. Tonight we getting into the story of Peter ROLLACK, aka Pistol Pete, one of the most feared stompers that came out of New York. Coming up in the Castle Hill section of the Bronx, a young Peter ROLLACK will be introduced to the street culture by his father and his grandfather. He was born in 1974 at a time when New York was starting to transition from the days of the mob to the days of the drug crews. When Pete was only 3 years old, his father was split, leaving his mom to raise a young Pete all by herself. His father would be rumored to have dealings with the infamous Nicky Barnes. Eventually, his father would be sent away to prison for 50 years. But before he left the world, he will always check for his son and make sure Pete was looking good and not struggling with his mom. A young Pete would cherish the time he spent with his old man before he got sent away. So much so that Pistol Pete would start to walk and talk just like his father. His mother would curse him for bringing that man personality back in her house, but she was just glad that he seemed to be handling it well. What she didn't know was that her baby was now a teenager who felt like he had to put on for his respect, just like his pops did back in the day. By the time the late 80s came, he already had a name for himself and was now running with a crew from out of his projects that he created and named Sex Money Murder. Pete would get the name from Soundview lingo. When Pete turned 18, his mother would be fed up with his street dealings and kick him out of the house. Losing mommies always felt like the walls would be crashing in, but not for Pete. Nobody to hide from, he now could put his gangster down the way he wanted to. Pete's father's close friend would catch up with him and put him on to the dope and coke game. At first, Pete would be against it because him and his crew was doing just fine, robbing and extorting dudes coming out of the Tunnel Club. But his pop's friend was playing with bricks, and that changed the story plot. Pete would take the bricks and turn up Soundview and all of the surrounding blocks. Before you knew it, he had 3 projects and 10 blocks clicking at one time. The part most would miss would be the fact that Pete was only 17 years old when he started that. The old head from Soundview would sit back and observe Pete. The old head would admire the way that Pete would shoot first and ask questions later. The old head would call out to Pete as he was coming through the projects. Say, my favorite man, Pistol Pete. I would call it, but I might spoil it, the old head said. Every time Pete saw the old timer hanging in front of the store, he'd have a rhyme, riddle, or a catchphrase. But this would be the first time he would call him Pistol Pete. Say that again? Pete would tell an old man, I think you on to something. Pete would go into his pocket and pull out a wad of cash. He'd take the whole knot and pass it to the old head, whose eyes would light up like it was Christmas morning. Pete was known to give the old timer a bill here and there, but never a couple thousand at one time. Pete would play with the thought of taking on the moniker Pistol Pete. When he asked one of his homies, Pipe, what he thought about it, Pipe would be like, yeah, that's the one. And that's the story how Pistol Pete became Pistol Pete. By the time 1993 came around, Pistol Pete's name was feared uptown in the Bronx and Harlem, and Queens and Brooklyn as well. He would have his whole hood in the Bronx clicking with either crack, dope, or coke. He even had a spot in NC that he used to get bricks off at. His cousin would play plug out there and everybody else was muscle, including Pistol Pete. When a customer who normally did business with them didn't have the $90,000 that he owed, Pete would start to lose it. After the dude stated that he needed a day, Pete would grant him that. When the next day came and the dude was a no-show, Pete would scream, I'm killing his girl and his kid. Watch what I tell y'all. He balked, but before Pistol Pete could make his next move, the feds would blitz, leaving Pete and two of his homies in the jam. The van he was in had the drugs stashed in a private compartment, 9 bricks to be exact. They all would give fake names, but before they would be let go, the cops were sending the dogs who sniffed out the drugs in the van. Once the cops sent it to the pound and got it stripped, they would find all 9 bricks, and all 3 men would have to bond out. Pistol Pete would shoot back to New York where a lot of his problems was waiting for him at. Pete and his crew had a good 10 bodies under their belt at this time. He had a saying called the wet t-shirt contest, where him and his crew would brag about going out and hunting ops, spinning on blocks and aiming for chests so the ops would have a wet t-shirt. Pistol Pete would set his sights on another street legend at this time, Carlton Hans. The 2 big names would be rivals in the Bronx at this time. Hans was a high school basketball star. He was known all over the world for his basketball skills. Rumor has it, he had college scouts at his high school games as early as 15 years old. After being sent to Maine to finish up his senior year, him and the defensive coach would get into it because Hans got caught on the cell phone. Truth was, before leaving New York, Hans was already getting sucked into the streets. So being back, it was only a matter of time before faith would lead him to the spotlight again. He would get a coconut that would throw him some keys on consignment. After the first 3 flips, Hans would start to buy straight up, so he didn't have to owe nobody money. The streets would compare Pistol Pete and Hans to each other all the time, and this would bring attention to the tension that was already building between the two. Pistol Pete, being the hothead that he was, would shoot at Hans on multiple occasions, but he would finally catch him when he spotted him coming out of an auto body shop. A stereo shop or auto body, I get it. Cut it out, alright? Calm down, relax. The hit would be done in his style. Twin would ride up on a dirt bike with Pistol Pete hanging off the back. Pete would spray Carlton Hans and one of his closest goons. Hans would die on the spot, but his friend would survive. Scared that he would sing to them people, Pete and Twin would spin back, but it was already too late. The stereo shop would be crawling with cops, and just like that, and just like he thought the dude would give a statement, in a week later, Pistol Pete was on Rikers Island fighting the Carlton Hans body. From the moment Pistol Pete got on Rikers, he had the jail in an uproar. Sex Money Murder was so deep that all the other gang leaders would be on point, as they didn't know what they was truly repping. This time, OG Mac had started the Bloods 2 years before. When he seen how much influence Pistol Pete had over his gang and other Bronx natives, Mac would step to him about coming under the Bloods banner. At first, Pete would pass because he was already a millionaire at 20 years old and didn't need Bloods for nothing. Low-key, he looked at the Bloods like they was dirty, while him and his crew stayed fly. Mac would get him to say yes after telling him he could bring the whole Sex Money Murder and start his own set and keeping Sex Money Murder as the name. Pete would beat the Carlton Hans body and be set free. He would go back to Soundview and turn the whole hood Bloods. Sex Money Murder would grow to one of the largest blood sets in America. Pete would go back to stunting on niggas and getting money, but Pete's time on the streets would get short. It was the North Carolina case that would come back and bite him in his ass. While locked up on the Hines murder, Pistol Pete would submit to a DNA kit, and even though he beat the body, his prints would come back, and that's how NC got on his true identity. While in court getting the murder case thrown out, Pistol Pete would then get arrested as he tried to leave the courthouse. North Carolina would put drug charges on him due to the 9 keys they found in the van. When they got locked up at NC, New York would then detain him only to extradite him to NC. Pistol Pete would get smashed with 45 years on the NC case, while only being 21 years old, but would give everybody the gangster they was looking for. At a community football game on Thanksgiving, Pete would send his shooters to get with his co-defendant on the NC case, and they did just that, shooting and killing him along with an innocent bystander. They didn't have nothing to do with nothing. Later, they would dub the hit the Thanksgiving Day's murders. Most would have thought his role ended there, but when it's a stomper, things could always get uglier. Feeling like most of his day ones abandoned him and was ready to flip, Pistol Pete would then start having niggas knocked off from his jail cell. Sex Money Murder would grow to one of the biggest blood sets in the prison system. One of the hits ordered from his cell would go down in history. While sitting, Pete would think that one of his closest friends was going to turn state on the NC case, and so he put a hit on him. The feds would step in at this time and open back up an indictment from New York, accusing Pete and 11 others of the RICO and racketeering and a slew of other charges. With the feds at the door and NC still trying to railroad him, Pistol Pete felt like the wolves was closing in. Pistol Pete would get caught with the kites putting hits out on people, and that's when the government finally decided to make an example out of Pistol Pete by running a campaign against crime with his face as the image of what not to be when you grow up. Pistol Pete would be hit with multiple life sentences, including 560 years, which means he will die in prison. One day, Pistol Pete had so much influence, still while doing life behind bars, he was calling shots, and that's when the government chose to move him to Florence ADX, where he had been for the last 20 years, ever since he was 21 years old. That was the story of Pistol Pete, Pistol ROLLACK, Peter ROLLACK, from out of BX, Be Next, Sound View. We would like to say, man, free Pistol Pete, hope you keeping his head strong. And that's your first episode of New York Stompers. We out of here.